Hey, hi! Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, I'm a critic, consultant, and programmer based in Toronto, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is Liz Cairns, an award-winning production designer. She worked on Never Steady, Never Still, and The Body Remembers When the World Broke Open, among others, who's also a writer and director of shorts. Her first feature film, Inedia, is a complex and unsettling character study starring Shook's Amy Forsyth as a young woman who arrives at a remote compound in British Columbia that promises to cure her food intolerances by training her to live on sunlight alone. It's a stylish and assured debut, and it's just arrived on digital and on demand in Canada. You should check it out. Liz picked Rosetta, the breakout drama from Jean-Pierre and Dardennes, the Belgian filmmaker brothers whose cinema is defined by its compassion for characters who can be complicated, difficult, and even self-destructive. Rosetta, a young factory worker living in a trailer park with her alcoholic mother, is all of those things, and a loss of her factory job sends her into a spiral, trying desperately to earn a living as door after door is closed in her face. Émilie Dequesne won Best Actress at Cannes for her stunning debut performance, and the film was honored with the Palme d'Or, launching the Dardenne brothers on a long and really wonderful career. 26 years later, Rosetta remains a drama of profound empathy and unnerving power, telling a story that's only grown more relevant in the years since its premiere. But you know that. This is Someone Else's Movie.
There's few films, like there's a lot of films I love and admire and I watch again and again, but I would say there's very few films that I feel like I've had a truly spiritual experience watching them, right? And Rosetta is one of them. It really, when I saw it a few years ago, it really kind of pierced my soul and my psyche, and it's a film that I've returned to many times, and it really struck me as such a profoundly beautiful film at the time. So it was one of the first that came to me. And then I had two other suggestions, and it's funny because at my initial list was Rosetta, Ratcatcher, and Lilia Forever. And then I thought, oh, these are all bleak films about childhood. Or like young personhood, and and then I took off Ratcatcher and put in a different film. So anyway, I thought, what does this say about me that I'm so drawn to these films that explore young, adolescence in this like really children that are really going through some very difficult things. So, but what I find remarkable about Rosetta is that even though it is a more bleak film, there's like, it's quite transcendent. There's like this really simple and tender gesture at the end of the film that for me is quite hopeful and beautiful.
Yeah, it's not, I mean, obviously the Dardennes had already made La Promesse. It's their second feature in the form that they wanted to tell stories in, but it is remarkable just how fully formed their storytelling style is, to the point where a tiny gesture at the end, and really it's barely kindness, right? It's simple human contact, but it lands with the incredible impact that it does because they've got us there. They've brought us to this point alongside someone who is so starved of kindness and compassion to the point where she's turned it off for herself. She refuses anything she perceives to be charitable, even if it's simply an offer of help. She can't take it for whatever reason, because by the time we have reached her, by the time we meet her, things have already spiraled down so badly for her, just a series of bad breaks or bad luck or whatever you want to call it, that she's carrying all of this emotional weight and built it into an armor that she can't take off. And I think that's their recurring theme. I interviewed them when Lorna Silence played Cannes. It was my one chance to meet them, and they're just such lovely people. But they want you to meet someone at their lowest point and then force you to root for them. And over and over and over again, they do it. They do the same thing. Like all their stories are the same story, but it doesn't become repetitive or predictable, because the whole point of their film is that every single person is an individual and every story is different. Despite, like, the circumstances may be the same, but the people are different, and it's watching the pieces fall together and leaving us at a point of hope. And every time it gets me, like every time it's incredibly powerful, potent, simple storytelling that just forces you to walk alongside someone or right behind them and just watch the world open up to them and hope they understand that that's what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. There's what I find so remarkable with their work too. It's interesting watching them speak about the film and speak about Rosetta because they speak about Rosetta as though she's a real person
Mm.
that they know and that they, have spent so much time with. And I think that's like you see that in all their films where their characters are so rich and complex and fully drawn. And Rosetta, what I love about the film and that I found so astonishing at the time is like the complexities of her character. They don't shy away. Here's a character who's obsessed and is like driven to get a job, which is like this singular focus throughout the film, which is so interesting, that she's fighting for. And she makes these decisions that are morally complex or, maybe in the hands of another filmmaker, there would be more time tending to her inner world and her thought process around a morally complex decision. For example, with Riquet,
Mm.
her decision to betray him. But with Rosetta, she just barrels ahead and makes these decisions, and we're catching up as she goes, and left to contend with how we feel about her. But um, at no point do I not see her full humanity, even though she's making these decisions that I don't, for me, that are more difficult to grasp. Um, and the relationship with Riquet in the film is so. I think one of my favorite films is when he puts on his cassette for her of his drum practice, and it's like we get to see these kind of this pleasurable scene unfold for Rosetta after she's just sort of had this punishing, difficult survive like going from moment to moment just surviving, and she gets to kind of enjoying the pleasures, which is so fleeting. She really doesn't take it in, right? She actually grows quite uncomfortable as he plays the music for her. Yeah, it's just a remarkable film. And what I find, like just studying them as a filmmaker and their practice, it's so meticulously planned. The film feels so visceral and immediate, and like we're watching a documentary in a lot of ways, as though the camera is like following and trying to catch up with her, but it's so well planned. And I think sometimes we can watch films like this and go, okay, so you just follow around an actor and see what they do. But they spend, from researching I don't know if you've read a bit about this particular film and their practice. I'm sure you know more generally about their practice, but they spend months in rehearsal. And prior to the rehearsal, they spend quite a bit of time on location, just the two of them, mapping things out and planning and thinking about the story and thinking about the character. And then 2 months of rehearsal with Emily Dequesne on site, going through the motion, going through the scenes, having her do very physical work, and then 11 weeks of shooting, which is wow. Like, and sometimes I think, oh, what a luxury, but with them, they're fighting for that. They're fighting. They have very limited resources on their film, and they're really working within the limitations so that they can carve out that practice and make that come to be. So, yeah, it's really interesting to study their practice. I think as filmmakers, we're always going, well, how does somebody do that? Like, how do you get such an astonishing performance out of a non-actor? And in their work, they're often working with non-actors, um, and they make it seem so easy. And again, same with their very economical storytelling. There's something about the way the story moves that feels so authentic and so real. But again, knowing that behind that is a very intentional practice and lots of iterations of the script and the character and in the rehearsal. So I just admire them.
I mean, there are other filmmakers who do similar things. Mike Leigh obviously springs to mind with his rehearsal process to even find what kind of story he wants to tell. But there is something so specific to the Dardennes about how I think it's that they need to care. I think they wouldn't really say anything about it. They were they weren't vague. They spoke about the process when I interviewed them, but they were really Lordness of Silence is a film that kind of plays into some Joan of Arc stuff and has an almost like you haven't, sorry, you said.
I don't think I've seen it.
It didn't get a lot of distribution. E1 had it in Canada, and there was some talk of Criterion doing it, but it never happened. So it just sort of fell between the cracks. But it's a very intense, very powerful film about a slightly older character who is kind of entirely alone, but has a boyfriend and has some work things happening. It's I'm going to be deliberately vague about that, but also finds herself pregnant. And as the third act picks up speed, becomes convinced that the baby is effectively divine, and works to keep herself safe from people who might be threatening her. And it's very ambiguous as to whether or not anything of this sort is actually happening, or if she's just having a breakdown or a psychotic episode. And that's what's so fascinating about the film. And they said that they spent a lot of time researching. They had played with is reductive, but they had used threads about mental illness and mental health in previous films. Rosetta has a huge streak of substance abuse and self-harm and all kinds of other things going on in there. But this was the first time they felt that they had to be absolutely meticulously responsible to the condition while being vague about what it was in terms of the film and the storytelling, because they wanted it to be ambiguous. So they had to be specific in behavior, but also ambivalent with the camera. And they said it took forever for everyone to figure it out and get to a place where they were even comfortable talking about shooting it that way. And in the film, you would not know this. It's so natural and organic. It's just something that's part of the story. What they described as their failure to find the tone nearly killed the project at one point, because they just didn't know how to tell the story. And then they got there. But the authenticity of something that's completely artificial is incredible. And I think the difference between Lee and the Dardennes is that they love all their characters, and I think Lee tends to judge some of them. I mean, he's certainly perfectly fine with making fun of certain characters in certain films. But the Dardenne brothers just love everyone, even the assholes. I think
Yeah.
they have their reasons. They're not good reasons, but they're acting from organic human responses. And then we just happen to spend the most time with Rosetta, and Emily Dequenne is so believable and instantly convincing as this woman at the worst point in her life, just continuing to dig holes for herself. But again, we understand why she's doing it. It's not the right choice, but it's the only one she can see.
Yeah, and one thing that comes to mind as you're talking about their other film that I really appreciate, and the humanity that they have for their characters, is they refrain from explaining or tending to why a character is the way they are. We're just sort of with them watching. Like, maybe they've done that work, maybe they've reflected on that, but we're not being. Again, sometimes, like, even my own instincts in work, it's like when somebody does something maybe reprehensible or morally ambiguous, where we want to understand why and be brought into that decision making. But I think that is there when they refrain from doing that, when they withhold. I think that brings in the humanity of the character even more so, is that we don't have to be kind of brought along as to why somebody would make that decision. It's like the complexity of human beings is just embedded in their work and the decisions their characters make. I thought something that was really interesting and kind of counter to, sort of the things you're taught as a young director, as a young screenwriter, is backstory, needing a lot of backstory. When you're working with an actor, and an actor wanting to understand why a character is the way that he is. But reading about the rehearsal process with Emily Dequenne, who was it was her first role, which is incredible. And they didn't like in the rehearsal, they didn't spend, okay, well, she's like this because her father was this way, or, it was like, okay, you're going to carry this stack of chairs over and over and over again and fight for your life, or you're going to hold on to this table and we're going to try to wrestle you away from the table, but don't let go, your life depends on it. So they did these really physical rehearsals with her, rather than the more intellectual approach where you're talking about a character and wanting to understand. And I just really appreciate that as a filmmaker, again, like sort of undoing some of the things I've been taught. And every actor is different in the way they like to engage with a character and how you engage with them, and you have to be responsive to that as a director. But again, I just really admire their approach, and even the way the casting. I don't know if you read a bit about the casting process for finding Emily Dequenne, but it's they took their time. They did a huge call out, putting ads in radios and newspapers and young women from all across the country writing letters and including a headshot and mailing in their headshot and letters of why they want the role. And then Emily Dequesne came to one of the auditions. She was sort of in the pile that got whittled down from the initial like hundreds of submissions, and she came all dolled up, hair and makeup and high heels, and but they saw something in her and they said, "Oh, can you take off your shoes?" And they sort of like made her go through all these physical exercises during the rehearsal. By the time she came out, she was like sweating and her mascara was running down her face. And her mother thought something bad had happened to her. She'd been kind of beat up in the rehearsal. But no, they just sort of put her through the ringer. And then it was really seeing her. I think they talk about, having her perform. There's a scene in the film where she's just been fired from a job and she goes to the workplace and grabs onto a sack of flour and just holds on for dear life, fighting to keep the job. It's a really powerful scene. So they had her act that out with a table in the rehearsal, and she held onto the table like her life depended on it. And they thought, okay, this might be our Rosetta. And then they did rehearsals with her with just the two of them and a small video camera and going through the motions. And they did that for 2 months before they brought in technical crew. And having all the crew around them made her very self-conscious and very aware of the camera, and she was blushing. And they were freaking out a little bit, being like, "Oh my gosh, maybe this won't work after all." And he had to go up to her and said, "You can't blush. You have to act as though the camera isn't here." And she went, "Okay." And then it was though everyone fell away, and she so badly wanted the job. And she fought for it. So they saw Rosetta in her. It's a remarkable performance. And of course she won the Best Actress award at Cannes that year. But I also really appreciate and admire their perspective on the worker. And there's these really interesting scenes where she's fighting, she's so single-minded, and there's this like individualism that runs through the film. And we have these scenes where she's taken another woman's job, and we get this glimpse of a detail that the woman's child was sick too many times and she had to be let go. And they're in the scene together, and Rosetta has her head down and the other woman is watching her perform the job. And it makes you think about this like ruthless competition that pits workers against one another. And again, you get sort of these little lean details throughout the film. Rosetta she hasn't been unemployed long enough to get another job, and her address is cause for some concern in another scene. And then, of course, there's that opening scene where she's just finished her trial period and they're letting her go. So you get these glimpses of a broader system that really denigrates the worker. And again, but then it ends with that final scene and this like gesture of connection. So for me, that's like the perspective of the filmmakers is encoded in that, and that there's that tenderness and that humanity that kind of comes through, even though we've been watching this really difficult journey that Rosetta's been on the whole film.
Hey, it's Norm, interrupting my own show to bring you up to speed on Shiny Things, my newsletter about physical media, culture, and the odd streaming project. Last week, I wrote about the 4K releases of Warner's The Accountant 2 and Universal's live-action remake of How to Train Your Dragon, one of which is a lot better than it has any right to be. Sign up for a 14-day free trial at shiny-things.ghost.io or find a link in the Semcast Blue Sky account. You like reading about movies? I like writing about them. Come check it out. There is no doubt in my mind that the Dardennes are on the side of humans, not companies. Capitalism is almost always the enemy, and this is such a clear statement of what is coming in the 21st century in this film from 1999. That it's all about people in higher positions that are still subject to higher positions above them, right? Like the people we are watching are at the very bottom of the chain. But the people directly above them are only one step above them. They're not any more powerful. And so the bosses or the managers, really, like the middle managers who are telling Rosetta that she can't take a proper contract now because her probationary period is up. And while there was nothing wrong with what she did, it's clear this is just how they avoid paying benefits or having full-time employees, right? It's a method designed to churn through people. And every other, as you said, every other decision regarding employment is up to someone else. And it's always a zero-sum game. You can, somebody else was fired, you can have this job, but you know why they were fired and now you're guilty. You can steal a waffle iron and start a waffle business, but you stole that waffle iron. And that is there is no greater good to be served in any of this. Like everything that happens to keep the money flowing in is in some way taking something from someone else. Either it's a job or an item or livelihood or respect or standing or status, all the way down. And I think it's been 26 years. I think we can talk about certain plot points, but there is the moment where Rosetta tries to asphyxiate herself and her mother and just end it all. And the gas runs out because she couldn't even afford that. And it just feels like, oh, this is hitting bottom. Like the suicide attempt isn't hitting bottom. It's the failure of the attempt. And then but it's not, it's darkly, darkly funny. But at no point is the film mocking her. Like it actually seems to feel more sympathetic in that moment towards her. And in Dickens' performance, you see the despair really crack through in a way that even arranging her suicide was pretty businesslike.
Absolutely. It's like she approaches death just as she's approached life, with this sort of like, now I must do this and I'll do this and I must go here. Like it's very instinctual. She just sort of moves through the motions rather. Again, we don't dwell on how she feels about this decision. She just goes for it's remarkable. But when you say, this asphyxiation, it made me think too about the use of like breath and wind throughout the film. It's so interesting when, the camera's always like, Rosetta's always moving. She's always running. She's always in motion. And then we get these moments where usually she's catching her breath. And that's when we as an audience catch our breath, when the camera gets like a chance to linger with her. And then there's a scene in the trailer early in the film where she's just trying to like stuff a window to keep the wind out. Get that really subtle, like the howling wind that's dampened as she stuffs toilet paper in the seam. Again, that it reveals so much about her character too. Like she's got this little kind of ragged roll of toilet paper that she keeps on her person. So these details that reveal so much about the character. And then again, it kind of comes back in that final scene when she's has turned on the gas, and we get that whistle, and then the whistle cuts out. So the way that they use sound is like so interesting in this film. And just like, that notion of like breath and wind and life and death. It's just a remarkable film. Again, it was like so pleasurable to dig into it again, because like I said, I watched it a few years ago and it really struck me. And I was watching a lot of films at the time and not connecting, and then just pierced through that. And then I was teaching screenwriting last year, and I showed it as an example as just really economical storytelling.
Oh yeah, they do not. They're reluctant to tell, I think. I mean, because that's the other thing too. Structurally, you are waiting for the confessional monologue and it never comes.
Yes, exactly. It subverts. It's interesting. That's why I wanted to show it. In some ways, it's this character with an obsessive drive that faces obstacles. It's something you teach in screenwriting, but it subverts a lot of your expectations throughout the film. You never know what's going to happen next or where Rosetta's going to go. And again, I think that comes down to the planning. Like they've thought so deeply about the character and how to distill and use these details or these objects that she has in her life to tell so much about the character. Even, for example, the boots, gum boots, I guess you'd call them, that she hides in a drain pipe when she goes to work. And then when she returns, she takes off her shoes that she wears into the city and takes the gum boots out and puts them on and goes home. And as she makes this journey, so it's a kind of ritual she engages in. And then, of course, later in the film, Riquet, in his apartment, her friend's apartment, he has a pair of boots, and she's even though she's there and they're kind of connecting, she sees the boots and she wants the boots. Um, and we're left to wonder why she has this ritual, why she hides again, even just like hiding boots in a drain pipe reveals so much about somebody's survival, and presumably she's hiding them so no one will take them. So that, yeah, they wield these subtle details so masterfully throughout the film.
Yeah. Oh, the waffle iron is another one too, right? It becomes an icon as much as it is a device.
Well, and it's interesting too. I was thinking about this, and I don't have the answer, but we only see Rosetta eat waffles and French toast. Her mother at one point has meat, and she throws it away because she thinks her mother has come by it through like dishonest means. So she throws away the meat, and we only see Rosetta eat waffles and French toast. It was, lacks like her full real nourishment, but keeps her full, I guess. And yeah, and then later I thought it was so. I'm curious to know your perspective. She boils a single egg at the end of the film, and just lays in bed and eats it. And it doesn't look like a very good egg, but I thought that was such an unusual thing to do before the decision that she's given, the decision she's making in the film. And again, we're just left to wonder.
Yeah, in the moment, it doesn't read as what I think it means, but I think it's her last meal. I think she's treating herself. She's already planned what's going to happen, and this is the thing she's been saving. But yeah, you're right. It does not look like an especially grand egg, or even in terms of a gesture, it's really, really small, but it's all that she'll allow herself. And I wonder, though, if it was supposed to be something else and they hit on the egg, or if it's simply something that would be most likely to be available to her. Because the egg, of course, symbol of life and all of that, and the life she might have had, or the plans she might have had for herself. But it's a fairly, if that is what I'm thinking it is, representationally, it's a pretty heavy-handed symbol, and that's not something they do. So I then found myself wondering, is this the way Rosetta sees the world? Is it not the movie, but the character? Like, does the film show us this person so well that we can understand even her dreams and even her luxuries are so simple and so small because she just doesn't believe anything else is possible?
Yeah. So rare. I mean, the only moments of like pleasure that she, takes in is really when she's working. You see sort of these glimpses, these very subtle glimpses of her enjoyment. So I didn't really know what to make of the egg, because it also it's like discolored, but she eats the whole thing. She doesn't turn it away. She, again, she perseveres like Rosetta does. Yeah, it's a really interesting final act. And then that final scene is just so astonishing. Like the final moment, of course, but that one take as she's carrying the canister across the trailer park, and they wield sound so well in this film, and in their films as well. But they've established Riquet's like sort of decrepit little motorbike that has this hard little putt. And I had different. Actually, it was interesting watching it again for our discussion, because I had a different. I guess I just saw his arrival a little bit differently this time. I wondered if in the previous. His arrival was very intimidating and quite threatening, and as that sound sort of starts to encircle her, and of course she's always in sort of fight or flight, and you sort of wince as you hear it approaching her. But this time, I guess I wondered more. But again, it doesn't seem like them. But I wondered more if he'd become aware of what she decided to do, because he'd learned that she quit the job, and if maybe he came there, because we don't really know why he's arrived in that moment. So again, it's one of those you're sort of left to question and wonder and dig in.
Yeah, I think it's because he's there to help. I don't know if he knows it, right? In the world, in the structure of the film, it's her break, it's her moment, and whether or not she'll accept the outstretched hand, right? It's the only question that matters at that point. But I think it does line up with the Dardennes' feelings that people are essentially compassionate, that every character is apologizing for the things they aren't willing to do, like help her at every stage. There's no cruelty in her being told she can't come back to work. It's just the way it is. And it feels, I mean, Olivier Gourmet is so wonderful at being able to suggest compassion underneath the language of business, because I mean he's so essential, I think, to their worldview, to the way their films come across, by being sympathetic within inflexibility. You know, you do feel like this guy is tired of saying this to people and is genuinely sorry, but also he has a job and he's not going to do anything that will endanger it. So he's yet another victim on the chain, but the sense that he's not evil. I don't think they believe in evil. It's something that runs through all of their films, that there are mistakes and there is stuff that's done with ill intent, but I don't think characters in their films exist to torture other characters. I don't think they see the world that way, and it's the thing that saves me watching their movies, because otherwise, you would plunge into the same despair. You're in each of their films, we're allowed to share the low points, but also to be aware that there are high points coming. What I really wanted to ask, though, is how did your students take it? How did they receive a film like this? What were they expecting, and what was the reaction?
It's interesting because I showed it at the end of the semester, because we were more focused on the short form. So I was showing a lot of shorter work, and then it was near the end of the semester that I talked more about like structure. I'm a little bit of a structuralist, probably more from a place of like, insecurity and safety, right? You're kind of turning to the books and being like, okay, how do they do it? And mapping these plot points and trying to have that be your guiding light. And some of my favorite films really reject some of the structure that I've learned. But I think Rosetta is really interesting in that, I guess it follows it a little more closely, or it's a good example of some of the screenwriting principles we were talking about in the class. And we had a really good discussion. I also showed Ratcatcher. So I think sometimes you're like, is this like, are these films a little too dark? And, they're coming with all their different references. It was interesting. There's the film that was very dominant in their minds was La La Land. That was the film that had inspired a lot of these students to go into film school. And you're like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to introduce you to some weirder stuff and some darker stuff here. But yeah, I think, for the most part, I think they really appreciated it.
Did they have opinions on her choices? I mean, I know that there's this current stumbling block in empathy cinema where people turn to YouTube for what are, euphemistically called plot holes. It's like, well, she just had to get on welfare. I mean, she wouldn't. Why? What's wrong with her? That I want to punch those people.
Yeah, I just remember like I had one longer discussion with a student who just loved the film. So I don't, if there were students in the class, which I'm sure there were, that didn't connect with Rosetta's, because she's so principled. Like she has her sort of her own ethical code that she follows throughout the film. That's really interesting. There's also like one thing that I think is really interesting is the relationship between her and her mother, because there is tenderness there, and there's these moments of like for the most part she's parenting her mother. She's trying to control her and get her to stop enacting certain behaviors and participating in like drinking and sexual favors, and but there's these like moments where her mother is maternal that I find really interesting, where she sews the name into the apron. And also when the mother is defending, Rosetta has stolen, she's found her mother in the caravan with the landlord, and they're drinking a bottle of liquor together. And Rosetta steals the bottle of liquor because she doesn't want her mother to drink and runs away. The landlord runs after her, chases her, is trying to catch her. And the mother runs after him and says, leave her alone, leave her alone. And that's really like one of the most maternal moments in the film from a mother that for the most part is not available to Rosetta. And then there's again, another scene that I found was so interesting, because Rosetta is so independent and she's moving through the world on her own. Again, we get the sense that her mother has not been a present parent, and Rosetta's had to grow up really fast. And then the scene where there's a lot of like scraps in the film. There's a lot of fighting, physical fights. But she kind of gets into a scrap with her mother and Rosetta plunges into the water, and then she's calling to her like a child. And it's this stark reminder that Rosetta is a child. She's 16 years old. And her mother, doesn't come to her aid then. But yeah, so I just, the relationship between her and her mother is so interesting in the film. Just again, I just appreciate, yeah, we don't get, like, Rosetta has her sort of ethical code, and we get kind of glimpses as into her mother, and a really forceful desire to be different than her mother and to live her life differently, that guides her. But we don't get much more than that.
Yeah, what we see is that she wasn't really given the opportunity, I think, to be a child. Like, she was never parented. And the circumstances that she's in, because yes, she is still very much beholden to her mother, right? Like, she's not even emancipated. She can't go out on her own. This is the only world she's ever known. And whatever circumstances her mother started in, it seems like she ended up in the trailer park. That was not always the lifestyle. That they've just had fewer and fewer options as her substance abuse issues got worse and worse. And this is where they are. And yeah, Rosetta's the only one keeping the lights on. So even there, you immediately know who this woman is as soon as she gets home, right? As soon as we understand what her circumstances are, we know why she had to fight so hard for her job, why she needed everything to work out, and why she is falling apart, because this is not the life she should have been living. This is not the life anyone should be living. It's not like, but it's still not a moral judgment, right? It's not her fault. It's nobody's failing that's brought us to this moment. We're just seeing the results of bad decisions that someone else made, and the helplessness that, again, maybe that's why she's incapable of accepting help. Maybe she did it before and it didn't work out. Maybe it was false hope that brought her to that point. But there's so much just in the way she reacts to things, in the fight or flight that you put so eloquently. That's her constant state, and there's no rest except when she is at work and confident that this will get her a check, that there's money coming, that there is a reward to this effort. But she does so much other stuff throughout the film with no reward whatsoever and no acknowledgement, that of course she'd appreciate a job where she's left alone just to do something simple and repetitive.
Yeah, absolutely. And then those moments, there's like a sense of ease that sort of settles in when she has that waffle job, and there's that pleasure that creeps in, and then it's gone so quickly. It's like, there's never a sense of stability in Rosetta's world. And that's the stability that she's chasing and grasping for, but can never quite reach.
Which actually brings me to your film, to Inedia, and the sense too that the person we are following through the story is desperate to trust someone, like willing to do anything to solve her own issues, which seem, by the time we meet her, to be destroying her completely. And the solution she reaches for, again, it's a leap of faith that might not be best serving her, I think. This one I want to protect. I don't want to discuss the nature of the film exactly, but the movie follows a character into something completely alien, I suspect, to most of the audience, right? You're taking us into a fully ordinary world that is completely not ordinary, and leaving us there to figure out what is and isn't healthy, if that's the way to put it.
Yeah. And I think what was, challenging in the writing, I researched, so I became very interested in breatharians, people that claim that they are nourished not by food. They claim to not eat food at all, but are nourished by light, or sort of like a divine source, an energy source that, according to some people, one can sort of transition off of food nourishment to this kind of divine nourishment. And you see these accounts throughout history, back to the medieval ages and the Victorian period. So I was really interested in these accounts and wanted to, tell the story of a young woman that becomes, I guess, in some ways enamored with, or sees this as her only path to well-being when she's struggling with her own mysterious illness. and and yeah, it's really difficult, right? Because it's a practice that has been ridiculed throughout history. Is sort of, yeah, it can be very judged, very othered. But I was interested in wanting to understand better why people claim to do this, and coming from a personal place with like a more fraught relationship with food that I had since I was a young person, and understanding very intimately a person's desire to relinquish their relationship with food. So that's how I came in, entered the story world of the film. Um, but it was I think what was really important to me was in the casting of the lead, of Cora, the character, because, you can't, it's very careful, not wanting to find somebody that's like too vulnerable, somebody who's like intelligent um, and yet still drawn to this belief system that many of us would ridicule or consider delusional or fraudulent. So the casting of Amy Forsyth was really pivotal to being able to tell Cora's story, I think. And of course, there will still be viewers that go, "Oh, why would somebody ever do this?" But I wanted to, kind of bring you into that path, and again, make certain suggestions, but give no answers as to why somebody chooses to go down that path.
Yeah, and Forsyth, who is also in Shook this month, which is in theaters, I think, still when this episode comes out, um, is so good at signaling the need, like the need to have an answer, to find something, to find a fix. And you do hear stories of people embracing all sorts of terrible, like openly awful ideas, or things that are on their face, hard to accept as even possible solutions. I mean, we just went through ivermectin, right? 4 years ago, or 5 years ago, the idea that, and people are still taking it and poisoning themselves because some idiot said they should. And the world of your film builds a space where everyone seems really rational. And if it's working for them, then maybe there is a chance. And you can sort of see the way hope factors in. And it's the denial of hope in Rosetta. So I just immediately saw the contrast between the two. It's like, this is all about somebody who wants something to be true because
Mm,
it will save her, because she thinks it will.
yeah.
Whereas Rosetta, as a character, is so far past the idea of ever thinking something will turn out well for her that
Mm,
she's shut herself off from all possibility. So it's a really interesting mirror image that
interesting.
it's also, because of the story you're telling, it's, and the locations that you use, it's so bright and beautiful and seductively naturalistic in the photography, in the sense that we're in a big open space with so much green around it. And Rosetta is just this, it could be a nice place if the sun was out, but that's not the world we get to see, right? It matches her mood so effectively.
Yeah, and I think they shot it in the winter, and you really feel the winter in the film, with her breath and
Oh yeah.
these textures. Whereas, yeah, I really wanted in Inedia for Cora to have this like a very, because in this belief system, and I think in an eating disorder, there's a denial of the physical self, there's the denial of the body and the body's needs, and this kind of a suppression or repression of the body's just very like physical, urgent, immediate needs. Um, and so I wanted to give this character like more sensorial pleasures, get to experience um, and reconnect with her body in ways that ultimately kind of lead her out of this community, and wanting to revel in that in the cinematography and the spaces, like really focus on like texture and light and foliage, light through foliage, to kind of, yeah, kind of underline these like earthly pleasures that Cora takes part in. And yeah, for me, an eating disorder, at least, I mean, they're so complex and individual, but for my own, and what I wanted to explore in the film is this like that disconnect between, um, you know, how you feel inside, and you can be surrounded by beauty and by food and nourishment and connection, but suffering within. So wanting to find that like in in the film as a whole and create that on screen. And I just, I mean, I love films that make me uncomfortable. That's probably more my taste in film. I love like a really good, like entertaining film too. But I really enjoy. that discomfort, which Rosetta brings, of course. And I don't mean to, the films are so different. I mean, Rosetta's, I just really look up to that film, but that is something I wanted to explore in Inedia too, is, how a viewer can experience discomfort in the body, right? And people have said, "Oh, I feel very hungry after I went in, I didn't eat before I went in, and it made me very hungry." And I think that's interesting when you can give or try to imbue like a physical sensation in a viewer to just give them a glimpse into what it feels like to have whether it's an eating disorder or a very fractured relationship with your body. That's something I wanted to explore. So, yeah.
Yeah. And by forcing us into exploring it, really, because the movie doesn't give you a choice. That's, buy the ticket, take the ride. This is what you're in for. It's compassionate in its own way.
Yeah. And thank you. Yeah. I've been, I think one thing that's on my mind quite a bit, in terms of, it's interesting because I think filmmaking itself, the way, how am I going to describe this? Like, some of the themes in Rosetta around work are really present in my mind right now when it comes to film and like the labor of filmmaking. And I think too, like the way that film can take such a toll, the production, the making of film can take such a toll on the spirit, on the mind, on the body. And like, I've been really interested, especially coming off of my first feature, which was a very difficult project to make, and how I'm really interested in how can you make films that center well-being of the crew, of the cast, of the makers. It's a very, especially when you have like very limited and lean resources and time. But I think that's like I think that conversation is happening now in film. But it's very present for me as somebody who has, complex relationship with health and with illness, and how do you make a film that centers, well-being and is balanced and safe and healthy. So it's a tall order.
Yeah, well, the more we get of them, the more they'll be. So that's definitely a positive that you did that.
Yeah, trying. It's very challenging. Yeah. I think that's like something we went into Inedia really wanting to have balance, but it's just so difficult, the actual making it happen. It's especially on a limited budget. Anyway, I'll save that conversation for another time.
My thanks to Liz Cairns, whose meditative and compelling new drama Inedia is now available on digital and on demand in Canada, and hopefully coming to the US before too long. Thanks also to Jared Clarkson. He knows what he did. I also want to note, it turned out neither Liz nor I acknowledged that Emily Duquesne died this past March after a diagnosis of adrenal cancer. She was just 43 years old. The movie stands as a testament to her career, but really, there's no justice in this life. You can find Liz on Instagram at LizVACairns, all one word, LizVACairns. And you can find Rosetta on Blu-ray and DVD in the Criterion Collection in an excellent special edition. It's also streaming on the Criterion Channel in the US and Canada, and available on HBO Max in the US as well, and you can rent it or buy it on various VOD services in the US. In Canada, it's just on the Criterion Channel, but that's not a bad place to be. You can find me on Blue Sky at Norm Wilner, and you can find this podcast there at Semcast, SEMcast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. The first year of the show is still available for just $20 at payup.com/Semcast. That's the first 52 episodes of Someone Else's Movie, 41 of which aren't currently available anywhere else. And check out my newsletter, Shiny Things, at shiny-things.ghost.io. I think you'll enjoy it. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it or the show in general, please say so. Leave a review wherever you've been listening. Every little bit helps. It truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're doing that. Stay safe, watch movies, get all the boosters. I'll see you next week.